Hey guys, tonight we tiptoe into the hooves first chaos of that one time Apollo, the golden boy of Olympus, god of the sun, poetry, archery, and basically every extracurricular was forced to take up a very humble, very earthly job, herding cows. Yes, the literal kind that chew cud and stare blankly while contemplating grass philosophy. You probably won't survive this story without questioning your entire resume. Picture this divine glory dimmed, radiant hair slightly tousled from wind, not summoned on purpose, and Apollo, yes, that Apollo, trudging across a muddy field trying to coax cows that have absolutely no interest in being coaxed. One of them might be named Helen. She's got opinions. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Drop your city and your local time in the comments below. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It starts with one of those classic Olympian episodes where someone gets a little smite happy. Apollo, known for his sense of drama, may or may not have shot some arrows into a group of unruly cyclopes for forging the thunderbolts that killed his mortal son, Asclepius. It's not exactly HR-approved behavior. So Zeus, father ruler, beard groomer extraordinaire, decides it's time Apollo learns a little humility. Not by removing his godly powers, no, that would be too tidy. Instead, Zeus does what any omnipotent sky dad would do. He grounds his glowing son and sends him to serve as a mortal's shepherd. For a year, possibly two, depends on how well he behaves. Think of it like divine probation, but with more sheep droppings and fewer espresso breaks. So down Apollo goes, his light dimmed just enough to avoid blinding mortals but still radiating that faint, I used to headline Delphi glow. He arrives in Thessaly, in the quiet little kingdom of Phyrae, and presents himself to King Admetus. Now, Admetus isn't your average royal. He's kind, polite, weirdly welcoming. He doesn't flinch when Apollo casually mentions, I'm here on punishment duty. He just smiles, nods, and hands him a staff. The goats need watching. Apollo, who once dictated prophecies in perfect hexameter, now spends his days counting goats that absolutely refuse to stay in groups of 10. The mornings start early. Not sunrise because awkwardly that's still technically his job in the sky, but early enough. You trudge with him across dew-drenched fields, the hem of his borrowed tunic swishing through tall grass. He's trying, honestly, practicing cow calls, learning the names of every single ox and resisting the urge to turn every meadow stroll into a tragic ballad. It's not all bad. Apollo finds solace in the quiet. The animals at least don't worship him. They just sort of chew and moo and wander. In a way, it's peaceful, it's pastoral, it's therapy disguised as livestock management. And surprisingly, he gets good at it. The animals begin to thrive. The herds grow fat and glossy. Milk production skyrockets. One particularly grumpy goat begins humming. Is it magic? Possibly. Is it Apollo playing the pan flute when no one's looking? Also possible. But the townspeople start noticing. Who is this ridiculously symmetrical farmhand? Why does their butter suddenly taste like it had dreams? Why do their cows walk with rhythm? Historians still argue whether Apollo truly toned down his powers during this stint, or whether he simply repurposed them in sneaky ways like giving each cow a sense of dramatic timing or teaching chickens to lay eggs in iambic pentameter. Meanwhile, up on Olympus, the gods pretend not to be watching. Hermes definitely is. He brings popcorn. Dionysus places bets. Back in Phyrae, Apollo learns to braid his hair in 3 plaits to keep it out of his eyes while mucking stalls. He learns the value of silence, the weight of routine, the way a cow will remember if you insult it. And yet, even while scrubbing troughs, there's still a glint in his eye. He hasn't fully let go of Olympus. You can hear it in the way he whistles to the cattle high and clean and haunting. A reminder this isn't just some guy on a redemption arc. This is Apollo. And he's trying very hard not to smite anyone with charisma. You follow him to the edge of a wide field where the cows graze lazily under a sky that no longer answers to him. He sighs, brushes a clump of hay from his tunic, and whispers almost to himself, "Well, at least they listen better than most mortals." The cows moo in agreement. Somewhere Zeus chuckles. And the year has only just begun. By now, you've settled into the warm, absurd rhythm of this whole celestial farmhand ordeal. Apollo, the one who used to light up temples, inspire odies, and destroy people with a single disappointed look, is starting to blend in with the field hands. Mostly. There's still a faint golden shimmer when he stands in direct sunlight, like someone left the saturation filter on too long. The mortal king who dared hire him. That would be Admetus of Pherae. Young, sharp-eyed, and somehow the only ruler in Thessaly not in constant need of flattery. He doesn't bow to Apollo, nor does he avert his eyes. Instead, he offers the god-turned-goat herd fresh bread and asks how the flock's doing near the cedar grove. And Apollo, in return, respects that. Not the bread, though he consumes it politely. The humility, the lack of fear. Admetus isn't dazzled by divinity, which, let's be honest, makes him about as rare as a polite hydra. He sees the man doing the work, not the god behind the glow, and so a strange and lopsided friendship forms. Apollo finds himself waking earlier, reaching the fields before sunrise not out of obligation but out of anticipation. He no longer tries to summon light with a flick of his wrist. He waits, lets the sun rise on its own, and pretends not to smirk at its slightly crooked trajectory. The heavens haven't quite gotten used to him not being on duty. Admetus occasionally joins him, not with ceremony, just casually. They talk about weather patterns, soil quality, and once, weirdly, whether goats dream in smells or sounds. Apollo says smells. Admetus says neither, they're too tired. They don't argue, they just walk. One foggy morning, Admetus brings him a carved staff, not ornate but sturdy. "Figured yours was too celestial for mud," he says. Apollo accepts it with a quiet nod, fingers lingering on the wood longer than necessary. And slowly, the townspeople begin to speculate. Who is this radiant farmhand who never seems to age, who tunes his flute during lunch breaks and hums melodies that make babies stop crying? Who healed that lame ox with a single touch? Historians still argue whether Admetus knew exactly who he'd hired. Some say it was divine coincidence. Others think Admetus, being clever, knew something was off the moment Apollo showed up without a resume, but with posture straight enough to shame marble. Quirky tidbit. Admetus reportedly once asked Apollo to babysit his cousin's hyperactive twins. The twins returned speaking in rhyme and convinced a goat to act out the Iliad. The goat's performance received mixed reviews. Still, Apollo behaves. He's kind, he's careful, he holds back. The fields grow bountiful, the animals docile, and the local musicians start composing more than just drinking songs. Something is seeping into the town, something golden elevated, like poetry in the soil. But not everyone appreciates it. Old man Dorion at the edge of town swears the cows have been staring too much. His rooster now only crows in triplets. The baker claims his sourdough rises too melodramatically. It's the herdsmen, they mutter. Too clean, too quiet, too symmetrical. Admetus defends him. He's diligent, he says. Unusual, yes, but good. And to be fair, Apollo is good. Possibly too good. When wolves threaten the herd one evening, he simply sings. The wolves stop, sit, and wag their tails. One rolls over. The next day, Apollo builds them a den far from the town and leaves snacks. You begin to see the problem. He's not just herding, he's transforming. And Admetus curious. Admetus starts to notice more. How the flocks follow Apollo without being called. How storms part over their field. how his dreams now come in verse. It's all very poetic. It's also extremely suspicious. But Admetus doesn't confront him. Not directly. Instead, he starts asking gentle questions. Did you say you'd worked in Delphi ever visit the Isles? Do you enjoy the lyre? Apollo deflects with grace. Delphi's overpriced. The Isles are too humid. The lyre and I are on speaking terms. And yet one day he hums a lullaby so ancient, so perfectly tuned to the breath of the earth that a nearby olive tree leans slightly in his direction. Admetus says nothing, but he smiles, because whatever Apollo is, he's trying. He's not performing godhood. He's practicing personhood. And that Admetus decides is worth keeping around. So the king does what no mortal usually dares. He offers him a raise. Apollo declines, but he accepts a second slice of bread. By now, the cows know the routine. At sunrise, give or take a dramatic pause, the golden herdsman appears like clockwork. He whistles in a tone that's frankly a little too melodic for cow chasing, and the herd shuffles obediently after him. You watch from a soft patch of hillside as Apollo moves like someone who should still be wearing laurels instead of sandals caked with mud. He is, for lack of a better phrase, punching a time card. Not literally. Of course, Olympians aren't big on paperwork, but he wakes, walks, herds, feeds, and shovels with the consistency of someone trying to earn back something invisible. It's a bit like watching a celebrity try to work the register at a coffee shop. He knows the motions, but every now and then, he stares too long at the horizon, as if trying to remember what clouds are supposed to feel like from above. Still, Apollo learns. He learns which sheep are petty, 3 of them, which cows will fake injuries for more hay, Helen again, which goat has mastered the art of sneezing dramatically to skip chores. This one might actually be divine. He logs it all in that big celestial brain of his and adapts. Because that's the thing about Apollo. Even when he's exiled, he doesn't have to do anything. If he's going to herd excellently. He organizes the grazing schedule, builds a new watering trough, teaches the sheep to align themselves in straight lines for faster counting. You suspect he may be composing hymns in hoofbeats. One cloudy afternoon, you find him composing something with sticks in the dirt. A sort of musical notation meets animal feeding chart. It's elaborate, possibly revolutionary, definitely confusing for the cows. Admetus passes by and raises an eyebrow. Productivity chart, time signatures, Apollo replies. And oat rations. Historians still argue whether Apollo's time on Earth helped revolutionize agricultural record-keeping or just created a brief fad where farmers in Thessaly tried to train goats to follow tempos. Some say the practice lasted for 2 years. Others say it ended after the Great Stampede of soggy melodies. No one agrees. You might think the day-to-day would bore him an immortal among the utterly normal, but it doesn't. Not really. Apollo throws himself into the routine with the fervor of someone avoiding introspection. Every minute occupied, every cow curried, every chicken mysteriously laying golden-yolked eggs for no scientifically defensible reason. Quirky tidbit. Apollo reportedly began naming the cows after minor gods he disliked. That's Deimos, bit of a kicker, and over there see the one licking the tree bark like it owes her money. That's Eris, and so the farm becomes his temple. The hills, his amphitheater, every echoing low of cattle like a prayer hummed under breath. He builds little stone cairns by the pasture gates not for any known religion, just because he thinks the cows deserve a nice entrance. They never notice, but you do. Still, you can feel it simmering underneath. That restlessness, that bright, uncomfortable reminder that this is a god doing mortal work. And no matter how many pails of water he hauls, how many hooves he scrapes, how many sheep get soothed with lullabies, he's not really one of them. Not quite. One evening it happens. A new farmhand recently hired makes a snide comment. Hey, golden boy, maybe don't brush them like you're in love. They're cows, not muses. Apollo smiles, but it's the kind of smile you see on a mask before it bites you. He doesn't respond, doesn't lash out, just hums, quietly, under his breath. Within minutes, that same rude farmhand is standing in the middle of the pen surrounded by goats who suddenly find his boots very, very interesting. It's all very dignified until he yelps and sprints across the field chased by bleating admirers. Apollo never looks up from brushing Helen. "Strange fellow," he murmurs. "Cows have better manners." Admetus hears about it, of course, but all he says is, "I think the goats just sensed his lack of rhythm." From that point on, no one questions Apollo's methods again. Still, the sun god continues to rise with the dawn, feed the chickens and whistle shepherd tunes, so sweet they make grass stand straighter. You follow him through his daily path, through the apple grove, the irrigation channels, the hill where the sheep gather just because they like the acoustics. It's simple work, honest work, but there's a rhythm to it that no mortal could have created alone. And when he ends the day, when the animals are tucked away, when the last bucket of feed is emptied and the stars start to blink into place like shy fireflies, he stops. He looks up. He watches the sky with an expression not of longing but of something quieter, like he's trying to remember the tune of his former life and isn't quite sure if he wants to. Because even gods apparently get used to a schedule. You might think Apollo would resent the repetition. Herding isn't exactly high-stakes divine warfare. There are no monsters to slay, no oracles to impress, no romantic drama with Daphne or Cassandra, or whoever else is still emotionally recovering. And yet, he stays. You watch as he leans against a fence made of gnarled olive wood, humming something soft, something not quite human. The sheep sway in time. The cows blink slowly, chewing as though meditating. Even the breeze seems to pause for a beat before it moves on. Because now, Apollo has introduced something new to his herding technique music. Of course he has. This is the god of the lyre after all, and to him, silence isn't peaceful, it's incomplete. So he brings a small stringed instrument to the pasture each morning, strung not with gold, but with horsehair and patience, nothing too divine. Just enough to hum a tune, pluck a note, compose a little lullaby for the livestock. At first, the animals don't know what to make of it. A few chickens tilt their heads, a goat attempts to chew on the instrument's neck. But then something strange happens. The herd starts responding. Not in a dramatic Pied Piper sort of way. No stampedes. No spontaneous barn dances. Just calm. The cows graze more slowly. The sheep cluster without being herded. The rooster crows precisely on beat, then preens like he just released a single on Mount Olympus Records. Historians still argue whether Apollo's field symphonies had actual supernatural influence or whether the animals just got really into the vibes. Some scholars suggest early examples of musical therapy. Others blame it on the fermented fig mash the pigs were occasionally fed. But the melodies keep coming. Each day a new theme, a new chord progression. He even composes one particularly haunting piece based on the exact order in which Helen's spots appear if you squint at her sideways. Admetus notices, of course. He walks the fields with a little more bounce in his step. His advisors hum absent-mindedly through council meetings. And the local baker begins shaping loaves into treble clefs for reasons he can't explain. Quirky tidbit. One particularly devoted chicken begins laying eggs in rhythm. 3 clucks. 1 egg. Cluck, 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 plop. Cluck, 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 plop. A visiting merchant calls it divinely annoying. Apollo doesn't brag. Not outwardly. But he does adjust the tuning pegs of his lyre with the kind of precise smugness only someone who used to judge musical competitions in heaven can manage. Still, he stays subtle. No choirs, no glowing halos, just soft tunes drifting across the meadows. Little gifts of harmony, like warm honey on toast. The cows come when called. The goats stop headbutting each other as much. And once, just once, a newborn calf stands for the first time to a delicate, a minor chord and immediately starts moonwalking. No one mentions it again, and the music begins spreading, not just among the animals, but Through the people, the shepherds sing more. The kids in the village hum as they draw symbols in the dirt. An old woman begins tapping spoons against a bowl in perfect syncopation and insists she hasn't felt this limber in years. You follow Apollo one evening to a quiet hill where he plays just for himself. It's not for training or taming. It's for memory. The notes stretch upward thin and golden like beams of sunlight frozen in the air. You swear the stars pulse brighter. But even amid this subtle symphony, you sense a shift. He's getting too good at this. You can see it in the way the animals now arrange themselves at night rows and spirals that look suspiciously like constellations. You can hear it in the songs sung by farmhands melodies that echo themes once heard only in sacred temples. The mundane is transforming into the magical, and that is exactly the kind of thing that draws attention. Not just from nosy neighbors or jealous lords, but from the ones who really matter. The divine grapevine. Rumors start to flutter up the heavenly chain. That Apollo, golden god of order and prophecy, is spending his time herding cows and composing lullabies. And worse, he seems to like it. Hermes snickers. Athena squints. Zeus pretends not to care, but definitely makes a few thunderclouds extra rumbly that week. Because when gods act too mortal, it makes everyone uncomfortable. But Apollo doesn't stop. Not yet. He strings a melody out of raindrops and morning dew. He teaches a shy shepherd boy to mimic birdsong on a reed pipe. He starts experimenting with dissonance in lullabies just to see if the cows notice. They do. Helen tries to file a complaint by mooing aggressively at a tree. And Admetus, he just watches, listens, smiles in that quiet, understanding way of his. Maybe he suspects, maybe he knows, but he doesn't ask. Instead, he says things like, "That melody? What do you call it?" And Apollo, grinning faintly, replies, "Breakfast." Because naming things is too final. And he's not quite done playing yet. It begins innocently, as all unsettling things do. One morning, you walk with Apollo past the lower pasture where the dew still clings to the grass like shy little ghosts. The sheep trudge forward lazily, their breath fogging in the cool air. Then you notice it. The cows are dancing. Not waltzing or pirouetting, nothing that organized, but they're definitely moving with intent. There's a sway to them, a subtle rhythm, a synchronized twitch of tails. Helen, your favorite, does a sluggish little sidestep that suspiciously matches the beat of Apollo's tune. At first, you assume it's a coincidence. Maybe a trick of the light, maybe your own sleep-deprived brain seeing patterns where there are none, like when you start thinking your cat can spell. But then the sheep begin to hum. Not a real hum, of course. Sheep don't have great vocal technique, but there's this tonal bleeding that seems to harmonize poorly but deliberately with Apollo's latest pastoral prelude. And the chickens. They peck in time. One even taps a stick against a feed bucket. Admetus catches wind of this and visits the fields mid-morning, pretending he just wants to inspect the grain quality. He stands beside you, arms folded, eyebrows doing calisthenics. Is that cow moonwalking? You nod solemnly. He clears his throat. And the goats? Bach's second suite, you whisper. Admetus sighs but doesn't say anything more. He just watches Helen attempt a curtsy. Historians still argue whether Apollo's musical influence was literal enchantment or just an impressively contagious case of enthusiasm. Some say it was early proto-hypnosis through rhythm. Others blame fermented clover. A few even insist Apollo was testing a grand theory of interspecies choreography. Either way, it becomes clear the animals are evolving. Not in the opposable thumb sense, but emotionally, intellectually, spiritually. One goose begins nesting in rhythm with the tides. A pig starts scratching symbols into the mud that looks suspiciously like musical notation. A horse refuses to gallop unless it hears a specific Dorian scale. It's unsettling and weirdly elegant. Quirky tidbit. A local bard swears a duck approached him at dusk and offered a perfect C note. He fled, dropped his lute, and took up carpentry. Soon, villagers start showing up just to watch the morning performances. Children sit cross-legged waiting for Helen's spin. Someone sells fig tarts out of a cart labeled pasture pops. It becomes a thing. And Apollo. He pretends not to notice. He stands in the center of the growing spectacle, humming lightly, brushing cows, and offering musical cues like a sleep-deprived orchestra conductor. You can tell he's holding back laughter. He loves this. Admetus, however, is now officially worried. He calls a private meeting, not a council, just a quiet conversation over bread and dates. I think he says slowly, our herdsman might be too effective. You raise an eyebrow. The cows are thriving, the fields are lush, we've got musical eggs. That's exactly the problem. Admetus isn't ungrateful. He just knows how the world works. When someone starts turning chickens into sopranos, the gods notice. And when that someone is a god pretending not to be one, things tend to get smitey. Still, he doesn't dismiss Apollo. He doesn't scold him. He just gently suggests fewer harmonies in the hayloft and maybe dial down the goat sonatas. Apollo nods agreeably, then proceeds to compose a quieter melody for the grass. It works too well. The grass grows in symmetrical rows. Bees hum in triads, and a mole emerges from underground with what appears to be interpretive dance. At this point, you no longer pretend anything is normal. You've seen a chicken do a jazz hand. You've heard a lullaby that made a fox cry. You've watched a snail inch across the barn door in time with a slow waltz. It's beautiful and haunting and utterly ridiculous. And it can't last. Not just because the goats are forming a choir union, but because somewhere far above or perhaps just around the next divine corner other eyes are watching. Eyes that prefer gods to act like gods and mortals to stick to their script. Admetus feels it. Apollo, you suspect, knows it, but neither say anything. Instead, they both show up the next morning, feed buckets in hand, sheep in tow, pretending the world hasn't shifted slightly to the left of reality. Because it's easier sometimes to keep dancing with the cows than to stop the music. By now, Admetus has developed a nervous twitch every time a goat hums. You can't blame him. The farm has become a place where nothing unmusical happens. Cows low in harmonies. Wind rustles leaves in sync with Apollo's humming. Even the kitchen ladle seems to have caught a beat. You find Admetus one morning standing on the porch, arms crossed, watching a line of ducks march by to the tune of a lullaby meant for calves. He sighs. They know choreography. You nod. They do a conga line after lunch. His eyes narrow as if contemplating the limits of sanity. And you don't think that's odd? Oh, it's absolutely odd, you agree, biting into a fig pastry. But it's a graceful kind of odd. Admetus doesn't respond. He's polite, but the bags under his eyes are growing more lyrical by the day. His farm is prosperous, yes, but it's also one bassoon short of a barnyard opera. And there's no playbook for what to do when your herdsman is a literal deity and your livestock might qualify for the chorus in a tragic myth. One evening, he attempts a gentle confrontation. He approaches Apollo, who's serenading the trees. Literally, the orchard has started producing perfectly symmetrical fruit. Pears in golden ratios, apples that hum when bitten. He clears his throat. Apollo, my friend, the herd loves you. The people adore you. But, he gestures vaguely, you've turned my kingdom into a lullaby. Apollo smiles faintly, and it's unnerving. The pigs now bow before the trough. Better manners. Apollo shrugs. 3 goats painted a mural of you in the barn. Artistic expression. A goose gave a TED talk. Apollo tilts his head. Was it any good? Admetus groans and runs a hand through his hair. You're doing too well. People are starting to ask questions. And that's the real issue, isn't it? Not the music, not the cows. It's the attention, the rumors, the occasional villager who says, hey, isn't that guy glowing? Or the traveling merchant who swears he saw the herdsman walk through a lightning storm without blinking. Historians still argue whether Admetus truly believed Apollo was who he said he was from the start. Some say he was cleverly pretending not to know. Others claim he was just willfully oblivious, like someone who notices their cat has started speaking Latin and decides not to deal with it today. Quirky tidbit. One record suggests Admetus attempted to test Apollo's mortality by offering him a particularly bad cup of barley wine. Apollo drank it without flinching. The goblet melted. Still, Admetus remains composed. He doesn't scold, doesn't beg. He just suggests ever so gently that maybe Apollo could tone it down a notch. Apollo agrees, sort of. He starts leaving his lyre at home, whistles instead, but the birds mimic his tunes. He skips the lullabies. Yet somehow the wind fills in the melodies. The cows continue to sway, and the sheep now prefer sleeping in harmonic clusters. In short, nothing changes, except Apollo starts to look wistful, less amused, more reflective, as though realizing the line between pretending to be mortal and wanting to be mortal is thinner than he expected. You catch him one evening sitting alone near the stream, plucking grass stems and braiding them absent-mindedly. Not into crowns, into fences. A symbol maybe, a metaphor definitely. Or maybe he's just bored, you can never quite tell. He glances up. Do you ever think about starting over? You blink, starting over what? Everything. He twirls a grass strand between his fingers. No temples, no prophecy, just cows. Cows that moonwalk. He laughs. Well, some things are too fun to uninvent, but the moment lingers. He watches the stars flicker into place one by one as if counting old friends. You realize then that he's not just hiding from punishment. He's hiding from expectation, from the inevitable pull of divinity, which doesn't like it when gods find contentment outside their assigned box. And Admetus. He begins to sense the cracks. He sees Apollo's fading smile, the weight behind the jokes, the way he stays just a few moments longer in the barn after the others leave. He doesn't say anything, of course. That's not his way. But he starts walking the pastures more often, starts taking over small tasks, starts easing Apollo back from the brink, not because he wants him to leave, but because he can feel the world leaning in ready to reclaim what it loaned. One night you pass the coop and see Apollo standing perfectly still, eyes closed, as the chickens sleep in concentric circles around him. He looks at peace, but his shoulders droop and the melody on his lips is slow, almost hesitant. He's still pretending this can last, and Admetus is still pretending not to notice. And somewhere in the distance, a thundercloud chuckles softly. You wake to find Apollo rearranging hay into spirals again. Not because the cows demanded it, they're still asleep dreaming musical dreams, but because symmetry soothes him. It gives his hands something to do, something mortal, something with limits. He hums as he works the tune, barely more than a whisper. No animals respond this time. Even they can tell the mood is shifted. The barn isn't silent, but it's holding its breath. Apollo's song has become slower, lower, like the sky before a storm. You lean against a fence and watch him work straw sticking out of his curls. For a moment, he almost passes for a regular farmhand. Almost. Then the sun crests over the horizon, and its rays follow him just a little too perfectly. They bend toward him like sunflowers. He doesn't seem to notice, or maybe he's just stopped pretending to care. That morning the fields are quiet. The animals eat without dancing. The sheep are subdued. Even Helen, typically dramatic, merely chews and stares. Something in the air says, be normal. Just today. Please. But Apollo doesn't play, doesn't whistle, doesn't hum. Because this is the day it all becomes too much. See, there's a threshold for everything. Too many musical goats, too many glowing footprints, too many villagers asking who's your herdsman and why does he levitate when he laughs. The chorus of too much reaches a crescendo, and Apollo breaks character. It starts with a chicken. Well, technically it starts with a joke about a chicken. One of the farmhands, young, bold, and newly assigned, makes a crack about divine poultry. He mocks Helen's dramatic moo. He calls the musical sheep a waste of barley. And Apollo, who usually chuckles at such things, goes very still. The farmhand keeps going. And what's next, huh? Is the rooster gonna recite Homer? He doesn't mean harm. He's just trying to be funny. But his voice cuts through the morning like a crooked note. It lands wrong. Apollo turns, slowly, like he's weighing the shape of air itself. Admetus notices immediately and starts walking fast. Not running, but it's too late, because now Apollo speaks, and his voice is quiet. That's what makes it worse. It doesn't shout. It folds the world into stillness. Say that again, he murmurs. The farmhand blinks, uncertain. I said, the rooster, reciting Homer Apollo, steps forward. Would that offend you? The wind stops. The grass stops swaying. Even the pigs freeze mid-snort. Do you know? Homer Apollo continues stepping closer. Do you know the weight of words carved by memory before ink was cheap? Do you know the sound of a name whispered so many times it becomes truth? The farmhand opens his mouth, then closes it. Apollo smiles faintly. Didn't think so. Then he lifts his hand not to strike, but to play. And suddenly there's no lyre, no instrument, just his fingers dancing on the air, like he's strumming invisible strings. And the air responds. You feel it in your ribs, in your teeth, in the birds overhead who suddenly stop flapping and glide, in the soil which begins to hum beneath your feet. He's not just playing music, he's playing reality. A ribbon of golden light spirals outward. The barn vibrates with harmony. And the animals, oh, the animals, they rise. Not on their hind legs, not unnaturally, just differently. The cows blink in slow wonder. The sheep align. The chickens form an accidental pentagram. It's glorious, terrifying, beautiful, like a sunrise inside a thunderstorm. Historians still argue whether what happened next was divine punishment or simply the godly equivalent of a bad day at work. Some say the farmhand fainted. Others insist he was transported to a celestial poetry seminar. One fringe theory claims he briefly turned into a harmonica. Admetus, to his credit, does not panic. He steps between Apollo and the awestruck herd, raises a hand and says, "Enough." And Apollo stops, just like that. The music cuts off. The golden threads dissolve. The cows blink, the pigs sneeze. One chicken lays an egg out of sheer emotional confusion. Admetus says nothing more. He just meets Apollo's gaze and nods very slightly. And Apollo, who could set cities ablaze, who once pulled the sun across the sky like it was his side hustle, lowers his eyes, nods back, then walks away. Then walks. That evening the farm is eerily normal. Too normal. No music, no dancing, no weirdly cooperative sheep, just regular snorting, bleating chewing. You find Apollo sitting under the fig tree near the fence looking utterly mortal. For once, he doesn't glow. You okay, you ask? He shrugs. I forgot who I was for a moment, then I remember too hard. You sit beside him. You gonna leave? He doesn't answer, just plucks a leaf and twists it. I broke the play. And the mortals don't like it when gods rewrite scenes mid-act. He tosses the leaf, and it lands perfectly on a branch 10 feet away. The air hums faintly. The cows don't dance that night, they rest. And for the first time in weeks, so does Apollo. The air holds its breath for days. No humming goats, no synchronized pecking. Just silence filled with tension so thick you could butter bread with it. Apollo has stopped his melodies altogether. The animals return to normal, or at least they pretend to. You swear one of the pigs is still composing rhymed couplets in its sleep, but no one brings it up. You notice Admetus pacing more. Not in a worried way yet. More like a man waiting for a second shoe to drop. He scans the sky more often. You think he's listening for thunder. Then one morning he arrives. Hermes, you know. He's trouble the moment he steps off the cart he didn't pay for. Sandals scuffed, a grin too wide, and eyes like he's always halfway through a prank. He twirls his caduceus like it's just a walking stick and announces, "Smells like divine mischief. I love it." Apollo doesn't look up from his apple. Hermes claps his hands. "Brother, long time. Heard you've taken up cow whispering. How's the retirement plan? Apollo shrugs. I get paid in goat milk and emotional resilience. You find a chair and sit down? Because you know this is about to be the kind of interaction that ends in someone losing a lyre or accidentally being turned into an artichoke. Hermes walks through the field peering at animals like a tourist in a very niche petting zoo. So, which one's your favorite, the moonwalking cow or the chicken who quotes Sappho? Apollo sighs. I fixed that. Oh, I know, Hermes winks. That's why I came. It's boring now. Admetus joins you. Hands on hips. Is this a casual visit or a professional warning? Hermes grins wider. Let's say I'm here on behalf of the Department of Divine Public Relations. Your god here made waves. The heavens don't love unsanctioned concerts, especially not when poultry gets more applause than priests. Historians still argue whether Hermes was sent officially or just got bored and decided to meddle. Some say he was acting under Zeus's orders. Others claim he smelled divine disruption from Olympus and came running like a kid chasing a fireworks truck. Quirky tidbit. One scroll from a temple in Boeotia suggests Hermes once installed a harp in a marketplace bathroom just to test ambience influence on coin offering frequency. Anyway, Hermes strolls over to Apollo and crouches down. You know this isn't sustainable, right? You can't just be here forever. Eventually, someone's going to demand a thunderbolt, and we both know whose desk that lands on. Apollo runs a hand through his curls. It was quiet. I liked quiet. Hermes softens a little. Yeah, but you didn't choose quiet. You chose hiding. They sit in silence. Even the animals seem to sense this isn't their scene. Then, with the dramatic flair of a bard who forgot his line but improvised something better, Hermes pulls a bundle from his bag. It's Apollo's lyre, the real one, gleaming, polished, and pulsing faintly with whatever god stuff Olympian instruments are made of. You left it behind when you stormed out, Hermes says. Figured I'd bring it before the mortals start thinking they invented music. Apollo takes it, doesn't play it, just holds it like an old memory. Hermes stretches, then turns to Admetus. You've done well. Your cows are famous in 6 city-states. I'd suggest getting into merchandise. Maybe Minotaur plushies. Admetus, to his credit, doesn't flinch. Are you here to drag him away? Nah. Hermes smirks. I'm here to remind him he still has a job. If he stays here too long, things unravel. You don't want that. Trust me. The last time a god forgot to clock in a volcano happened. In the wrong continent. Then he's gone. Literally one blink and there's just dust and a faint whistle that suspiciously sounds like the first 3 notes of a tavern jig. Apollo stands there alone with the lyre. You approach carefully. You okay? He chuckles. Hermes always arrives like a door you forgot you left open. That night he plays, not loudly, not for the animals, just for himself. The melody is soft, complex, and full of something that feels like regret and also a bit of readiness. Admetus listens from his balcony silent. No cows dance, no sheep harmonize. But you swear somewhere out in the darkness a breeze carries the tune a little farther than it should. The following morning, things feel lighter. Not normal exactly. Normal doesn't return once a god has taught your goats jazz, but closer to manageable. The cows go back to munching. The chickens return to pecking. And Apollo, for now, hums only to himself. You think you might make it through a whole week without cosmic disturbance. But this is Hermes we're talking about. It starts with a missing salt jar. Then a pair of shoes, specifically Admetus's best sandals. The ones he saves for diplomatic visits vanish. Then a wine jug disappears. Then 3 entire goats. No ransom notes, no hoof prints, just gone. You know what this means, everyone knows. Hermes is bored again. He returns that evening carrying a stolen loaf of bread, 3 golden coins that definitely aren't local currency, and one of the goats wearing sunglasses. Apollo doesn't even look up from his lyre. Really, Hermes grins utterly unapologetic. I borrowed a goat for a business meeting. With who? Hermes shrugs. The Fates. Turns out they like goat cheese. Admetus sighs the sigh of a man who once dared ask the gods for help and now reaps the infinite consequences. Please return my livestock. Eventually, Hermes says, completely unserious. But first, I need a favor. And here it is. The chaos comes with a request always. That's how Olympians work. They don't trade, they nudge like toddlers with too much magic and a penchant for dramatic irony. Someone, Hermes says, wants to know what Apollo's really doing here. Apollo finally sets down the lyre. His gaze sharpens. Someone who Hermes clicks his tongue, feigning innocence. A few temple patrons, one minor demigod, maybe Zeus, maybe not. Maybe he's too busy arm wrestling Mars again. You roll your eyes, so you were sent. Define sent, Hermes replies, adjusting his stolen hat. Historians still argue whether Hermes' visit was sanctioned or self-appointed. Some say it was all part of a divine plan to lure Apollo back. Others suggest Hermes had simply run out of underworld errands and thought it'd be funny to stir the pot. One especially fringe theory proposes Hermes just wanted to find out if cows could in fact play the flute. Spoiler not well. Apollo stands brushing straw from his cloak. I'm not going back. Not yet. Hermes raises an eyebrow. That's not up to you, isn't it? The wind pauses again just for a moment. Hermes adjusts his footing. If you stay, things bend. Fates reroute. Mortals get bold. You know what happened last time. Apollo flinches barely, and there it is. The past. The thing they never say aloud. The last time a god ignored divine duty, someone started a war, and not a poetic one. An ugly, exhausting one. The kind with siege ladders and ruined poetry. Quirky tidbit. Some fragments claim Hermes once tried to broker peace during that ancient war by offering baked figs shaped like spears. It did not work. It did. Apollo stares into the distance. I just wanted a break, a quiet century. And you got one, Hermes says, not unkindly. But now the stars are getting antsy. You can't just sit in a field when prophecies go cold. Apollo closes his eyes. I'm not ready. Hermes softens. For once, he speaks gently. No one ever is. The silence that follows is thick enough to butter. Even the cows seem to sense the conversation is holy, or awkward, or both. Finally, Admetus steps forward. If you need to go, I understand. Apollo looks at him, and something in his expression fractures. You're not mad. Mad, Admetus laughs. You've fertilized my fields with sunshine. My livestock might be enchanted, but they haven't aged in months. My wheat wrote a sonnet. They all pause. Okay, maybe that's a problem, Admetus admits. But still, you've done more good than harm. I think. Hermes claps his hands. Great group therapy complete. Now let's pack. But Apollo doesn't move. He walks instead to the center of the field where the cows are chewing and pretending not to listen. He raises his hand and they all lift their heads. Then softly he plays. Just a few notes. The grass glows. The wind sighs. A goat snorts in a very melodic key of C. It's not a farewell, not yet. But it is a beginning of one. Hermes watches, arms crossed, but says nothing. Admetus watches too, and you sitting on the fence wonder how long the quiet will last this time. The next morning, everything feels too still. As if the air itself is holding its breath, waiting for something, waiting for Apollo to make a choice for the next chapter to unfold. You walk through the fields, hands tucked in your pockets, trying not to think about the inevitable. Apollo is always close, always radiating the tension of someone who's used to being the one in charge. But today, he doesn't seem in control, not of himself and certainly not of what's coming. He's standing in the middle of the pasture, once again surrounded by cows who are only mildly convinced of their superior dance abilities. They munch lazily, unbothered by the orchestra of birds that would have normally sung them into a synchronized waltz. It's quiet, unnervingly so. Apollo's hand rests on a fence post, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He's trying not to appear lost, but his shoulders are slumped in a way you haven't seen before. Admetus walks beside you, a soft murmur of curiosity on his lips, but even he can't seem to break the spell. I didn't expect this, he says softly. I thought he'd leave with a bang, with some fireworks, even if they were metaphorical. You nod. You too thought he'd announce his departure like some heroic exit on horseback. But it's not like that. Instead, it's more like the slow fading of a song, where the last note lingers in the air long after the music has stopped. You glance at Apollo, unsure of how to approach this delicate moment. And then, as if on cue, Apollo turns to face you both, his eyes flickering with that familiar divine intensity. For the first time in days, he smiles, but it's not his usual shining grin. It's softer, almost sad, like the edge of a forgotten memory. I have to go, he says. The words hang in the air for a moment, heavy with unspoken emotion. I've done everything I can here, haven't I? You look around at the lush fields, the content animals and the peaceful landscape that was once just a farm now transformed into something almost otherworldly. Yes, Apollo has left his mark here, and yet something seems unresolved. Admetus steps forward, his hand on the fence beside Apollo's. You've given us so much more than we could have hoped for, he says, his voice steady but laced with affection. But if you're ready to go, if it's time… Apollo nods, his expression unreadable. It's not about whether I'm ready, he murmurs. It's about whether the world is ready for me to leave it behind. He looks at the land, his gaze lingering on the animals that, despite everything, still don't quite know who or what Apollo is. I came here to remember, but now it's time to move forward. Not every god belongs in a pasture. Not forever. It feels like a weight lifts from his shoulders, but there's still something lingering in his voice, something unresolved, like the last note of a song that never truly finished. Admetus watches him carefully, as though sensing Apollo's internal conflict. You'll always have a place here, he says quietly. No matter what you decide, we're thankful. Apollo doesn't respond at first. Instead, he turns toward the horizon again. His gaze now distant, as if he's already halfway between this world and the next. You can't help but wonder if he's not just stepping away from a field of cows, but from an identity he's worn too comfortably. You glance around. Even the animals seem to sense something is shifting. The cows, though still content, stop their grazing for a moment, as though waiting for something, or someone. The birds no longer sing as loudly. The wind holds back, hesitant to touch Apollo's face. It's an odd thing to witness, even more odd to feel. And then, just as the silence seems to stretch on too long, Apollo raises his hand in a slow, deliberate motion. The sky, oddly cooperative, dims a little, the clouds parting slightly to let the light peek through in a soft, golden embrace. Goodbye, he whispers, more to himself than to anyone else. But the word carries a weight and acknowledgement of the space he's leaving behind. The animals seem to understand. They remain still, as if giving him a moment. And just like that, it's over. The music stops. Apollo turns and starts walking slowly back toward the farmhouse, back toward the path that leads to the hills. His steps are measured but steady, and though he doesn't look back, there's a subtle grace in the way he moves, a grace that wasn't there before. As if for the first time in a long while, he's at peace with his decision. Admetus watches him go, his face soft but filled with quiet understanding. You stand beside him, and the two of you just watch. No words are necessary. The air, thick with anticipation just moments ago, now feels like the calm after a storm, quiet, expectant, but also filled with a strange sense of completion. Apollo walks until he's nothing more than a figure in the distance, his silhouette melding with the horizon as the sun's golden rays finally begin to reclaim the sky. You know he'll disappear soon, like the last note of a song that has been played so many times it's become a part of the wind. And with that, the pasture is silent once again. For a brief moment, you wonder if Apollo will come back. But you don't say it aloud, you don't need to. The world for now is his to leave behind. And so the farm becomes just a farm again. Ordinary. Quiet, but not without a trace of the extraordinary. And somewhere far above, Apollo watches over it all, a little less godly but no less Apollo. The days following Apollo's departure unfold slowly, quietly. The rhythmic hum of the farm is gone, replaced by the usual sounds of animals going about their business. No more serenades from cows. No more sheep attempting a complex round of folk dances. There's an eerie peace to it all, a kind of calm that settles into the soil, and the sky almost as if the world is holding its breath. Admetus continues his work tending to his land and livestock, but there's a subtle shift. His mornings, once marked by the gentle chime of divine music, are now filled with a sense of something missing. He visits the fields less frequently, opting instead for solitary walks through the orchards or by the stream. He's not sad per se, but you sense the weight of absence, the void left behind by a god who had once strummed his lyre and changed the air itself. You too find yourself walking the fields, running your hands along the now quiet fence posts where Apollo's touch once lingered. The animals are still the same content, if a little more reserved, but there's a certain stillness to everything. It's as though Apollo's presence was more than just music and light. It was the pulse of the land itself. One evening, as the sun begins its slow descent into the horizon, you find yourself sitting in the same spot where Apollo once played. The trees have settled into their usual rhythm, the animals grazing lazily in the distance. And for the first time since his departure, you hear something soft, almost imperceptible, like the faintest echo of a melody. You look around, but no one's there. There's no lyre, no golden glow, but you know somehow that it's him. Admetus joins you quietly, his face calm but thoughtful. "Do you hear that?" he asks. You nod, though you're not sure you can explain it. It's just a whisper, but it feels like he's still here, in the air. Admetus doesn't reply right away. He simply stares at the field, his hand resting on the worn edge of a fence. "I think you're right," he says softly. "It's not just about what he did here. It's about what he left behind. The change. The music, even if it's no longer played." There's a pause as the two of you sit in silence, watching the stars begin to twinkle above. "Do you think he'll ever come back?" you ask the question, lingering in the quiet night. Admetus doesn't answer immediately. Instead, he looks up at the stars, his eyes narrowed slightly, as if searching for something beyond the visible. Finally, he shrugs, a small, resigned smile tugging at his lips. "Maybe, but I don't think it'll be the same." He was something different when he was here. Not just a god, something else. You watch the night unfold, the soft rustling of leaves in the wind, the faint murmur of the river, and the distant calls of the birds as they settle in for the night. The farm feels in some strange way alive with the memory of what it once held. And as the wind picks up, it carries with it the faintest strain of music. A note here, a chord there, as if Apollo's presence still lingers tucked into the folds of the earth. It's not the same as before. There are no grand symphonies, no full orchestras of cows and chickens in perfect harmony, but it's a reminder, a subtle echo. Apollo is gone, but he's not really gone. Admetus turns toward you, his expression contemplative. Maybe this is what it was all for. To remind us that even gods need to rest. And maybe we need to rest too. Not everything has to be a grand performance. Sometimes, it's enough just to listen. You smile faintly. To the quiet, he agrees. And as you both sit there watching the stars flicker into the night, you realize that maybe Admetus is right. Maybe this is what Apollo needed to discover, what they all need to discover eventually. That there's power in stillness, in the quiet moments between the music, the space where everything pauses to breathe. The quiet doesn't have the same flash or brilliance, it doesn't have the golden glow of a divine light, but it has something else. It has peace. And with that, the wind carries the last notes of Apollo's song into the distance, fading like a memory, leaving behind nothing but a peaceful, untouched pasture where cows graze, the earth hums, and the world quietly continues. For now, at least, the music is over, but in the quiet that remains, you know Apollo's melody still lingers, somewhere, just beyond the edge of the horizon. Time moves as it always does, and with it the farm returns to its rhythm. The cows still graze, the chickens still peck, The occasional musical note drifts through the air, but it's a rare whisper, just a memory now, like an old song that lingers at the edge of your mind long after it's finished. The barn feels more ordinary without Apollo's divine touch, and yet there's something almost comforting in that. The lack of spectacle, the absence of constant awe, brings a sense of normalcy that's been absent for too long. Admetus seems to find peace in this. His steps are lighter now as he walks through the fields, no longer weighed down by the knowledge that his mortal kingdom once hosted a god-turned herdsman. He's adjusting to the quiet just as you are. You start to see him smile more, greet his workers with a warmth that used to be buried under the stress of divine intervention. But then, as happens in the rhythm of all things, there's an unexpected change. It's not grand, it's not thunderous, but it's noticeable. One morning you find yourself walking through the fields thinking nothing of it, just a regular day in the life of a farm that once had Apollo but now lives without him. The light is soft and the breeze carries the faint scent of something unfamiliar, and then you hear it. A whistle. Not a cow's call, not a goat's bleat, but a melody. You freeze, hand resting on the fence post, heart suddenly racing. It's faint at first, like a distant echo, but then it grows clearer. It's a tune one you recognize immediately. It's Apollo's. You turn half expecting to see him standing there, lyre in hand, the golden glow of his presence like a sunrise breaking through the sky. But he's not there. And yet, the sound persists, soft, flowing, delicate. You follow the sound, heart pounding in your chest, and there near the edge of the pasture is a sight that you almost don't believe. It's not Apollo, but it's something, a figure standing in the morning light, a faint glow still clinging to their skin like sunlight clings to dewdrops. They're not playing a lyre this time. Instead, they're simply standing there breathing in the air as if becoming part of the landscape itself. It's not Apollo, but it feels like him. A chill runs down your spine. The figure turns as if sensing your presence, and for a moment time seems to stretch. It's not Apollo, but it's his essence. It's the stillness that follows a melody, the whisper of something greater than the world itself. You step forward slowly, unsure whether you're stepping into something new or merely revisiting the past. The figure smiles a soft, serene smile, the kind that holds no burden, no unfinished business. You're not imagining it, they say softly, their voice like the sound of wind rustling through trees. You blink, still unsure whether you're dreaming. I thought you left. I did, they reply. And there's a peace in their words. But everything I left behind, it stays. The fields, the songs, the quiet. They're all part of what I was. And now they're part of what you are. You don't know what to say. You've lived through the silence after Apollo's departure, thought you'd understood the finality of his absence. But here, standing before you, is something that feels like him, yet not him. A reflection, an afterglow. The god who once moved the sun and played lullabies now walks among the ordinary, leaving only the echo of his presence behind. You won't see me again, they say, gently as if reading your thoughts, not in the same way, but the quiet you feel, the rhythm that keeps the world turning, that's the part of me that remains. And just as suddenly as they appeared, the figure begins to fade as though the morning light itself swallows them whole. The sound of the melody lingers in the air like a trace of sunlight in the corners of your vision, and then just as quickly, it's gone. The farm is still again. You stand there for a long time, absorbing the emptiness that follows the echo of Apollo's music fading into the distance. But something has changed, something subtle and eternal. Apollo is gone, yes, but his legacy, the quiet beauty, the music of the earth, the way the world hums, even in silence, remains. Admetus finds you standing at the edge of the field hours later. The light is soft, the world is peaceful, and for a moment neither of you speaks. There's no need. The air between you holds a new understanding, a new chapter in a story that neither of you could ever have predicted. You knew, didn't you? Admetus asks quietly, his eyes on the horizon, that he would leave something behind. You nod, a smile tugging at your lips. Maybe we all do, in one way or another. The silence between you feels different now, calm accepting. The song may have ended, but it still echoes, lingering in the air like the final chord of a lullaby that never truly fades away. And somewhere deep in the fabric of the world, Apollo's presence continues not as a god, but as something quieter, something lasting. The world turns as it always does, but you know now that even in the silence there is music. The days pass, with the slow, steady rhythm of life on a farm untouched by gods, yet forever marked by them. Admetus continues to walk the fields, his steps lighter than they've been in ages. The cows still graze the chickens, still peck, and the sheep occasionally gather in tight clusters, forming patterns that remind you of constellations and echo of the divine presence that once resided here. But life once again has settled into a quieter pace. And yet something is subtly different. You find yourself waking earlier each day, drawn by an instinct you can't quite place. The mornings are peaceful, but there's an undercurrent of something beyond the ordinary. Perhaps it's the way the light shifts just a little brighter now, or how the air smells of earth and wind as if the seasons themselves remember Apollo's touch and honor it with every passing breeze. One afternoon, you find yourself walking through the orchards alone. The trees are heavy with fruit, the apples now ripe and glowing, the scent of figs in the air. You pass a familiar grove where Apollo once hummed to the trees, his fingers brushing against the bark in perfect harmony. The memory feels like a dream now, distant and untouchable. But as you walk deeper into the grove, something catches your eye. A single fig the color of gold glints in the sunlight. You stop curious and reach up to pluck it from the branch. It's the size of a small melon, impossibly perfect in its shape and hue. As your fingers touch the fruit, a quiet hum vibrates through the air, a subtle, gentle note that seems to come from the fig itself. You pull it down, examining it more closely. No ordinary fig, this. Its surface gleams as though imbued with the remnants of a celestial touch. You feel it, Apollo, in the stillness of the moment. His presence isn't gone, not completely. It lingers here in the land he tended, in the fruits that grew under his care, in the quiet music that still resonates in the air. With a soft sigh, you sit beneath the tree, the fig resting in your hand. You bite into it slowly, the sweet, rich flavor filling your mouth. It's like tasting the sun itself, like feeling the pulse of life that Apollo once brought to this place. The world feels more vibrant, more alive, even in its silence. For a long time, you simply sit there listening to the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze, the distant calls of the birds, the slow murmur of the river. The quiet is no longer something to fear, it's something to embrace. And in the distance, just at the edge of your hearing, you catch it again, the faintest melody. A note carried on the wind, a tune so delicate it could be a memory, a dream, or something more. Apollo is gone, yes. But his music, the rhythm of his world, has never truly stopped. It lives in the land, in the people, in the animals, in the spaces between moments. It's the heartbeat of life, quiet but constant, just as it was meant to be. The sun begins to dip low on the horizon, painting the sky in soft hues of purple and orange. You feel a peace that wasn't there before, a connection to something larger than yourself. And as the stars begin to twinkle, you look up, half expecting to see Apollo's familiar golden light. It's not there. Not in the way it once was. But then a soft breeze stirs the trees and you hear it, a chord, a simple note, as if the earth itself is playing its own song. And you smile. Maybe Apollo never truly left after all. Maybe he simply learned to listen to the quiet, to the music of the world that continues long after the gods have moved on. You get up, the fig still in your hand, and walk back to the farmhouse, the last of the light fading behind you. The world moves on as it always has. But in the stillness, you know that Apollo's legacy remains in the land, in the air, in the hum of the night. And in that moment, you realize that sometimes the greatest music is the one that's not played, the one that lingers quietly just beyond the edge of hearing. The next few days unfold gently, as though the land itself is holding its breath, waiting for the story to catch up to the quiet. You've grown accustomed to the stillness of the fields, the unhurried rhythm of everyday life. The animals go about their routines, the crops ripen in the soft glow of the sun, and the air remains cool with the memory of the season's first frost. The fig tree where you sat just days ago has become a sort of sacred place for you, though no one else seems to notice. It's as though Apollo's lingering presence and unspoken connection has transformed it into something more. You visit often carrying the weight of the silence with you, savoring the stillness that was once interrupted by music, by movement, by something greater than you could understand. The world feels slower now. The animals are at ease, and so is Admetus, though there's a quiet edge to him. He hasn't mentioned Apollo's absence much, but you can tell it's there tucked beneath his calm exterior like a thread pulling at him from the inside. One evening after a day of working the fields, you meet Admetus by the stream. The sun has set, leaving only the afterglow in the sky, and the world feels at peace. There's a slight chill in the air, but it's the kind that makes you feel alive, alert. Admetus is sitting on a stone by the water, his hands folded in his lap. You take a seat beside him, unsure of how to break the silence that stretches between you. For a long while, neither of you speaks. You just sit there watching the water trickle by the distant murmur of crickets beginning their nightly chorus. Finally, Admetus speaks, his voice quiet, like he's been holding on to something for a long time. I've been thinking, he says, his gaze focused on the water. About Apollo, about what he gave us. You stay silent, unsure of what to say, but you feel the weight of his words hanging in the air. We were so caught up in it all. Admetus continues, his voice soft but steady. The music, the harmony, the everything. It was like living inside a dream, but now it's just quiet. And I'm not sure if I'm ready for that. Not yet. You look at him, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes that he rarely lets show. There's no judgment in his words, no regret, only a deep, quiet longing. We were never meant to stay in the dream forever, you say, your voice softer than you intended. Not even Apollo could stay. Admetus nods slowly, his eyes still on the water. I know he couldn't. But the quiet is hard. It feels like something is missing, like we're just waiting for something else to come to fill the space. You think about it for a moment. Maybe the quiet isn't something that needs filling. Maybe it's something we're supposed to learn to live with. After all, it wasn't just Apollo's music that changed things. It was the way we started to listen. To really listen. Admetus turns to look at you, his eyes searching yours as if weighing your words. Do you think that's enough? You pause, feeling the cool breeze on your skin, hearing the soft rustling of the trees, the distant calls of the animals. I think the world is always changing, Admetus. It's never static. The music was part of it. But the quiet? The quiet is a chance for us to find our own rhythm. To find our own way to keep the world moving, even without the sound of a lyre. Admetus is silent for a long time, his gaze returning to the stream. Finally, he lets out a soft sigh and smiles, though it's bittersweet. Maybe you're right. Maybe the quiet is what we need. What we've always needed. To find our own song. You smile, feeling a sense of peace settle between you both. It's not the same kind of peace that Apollo's presence brought. But it's a peace born of acceptance. A quiet, gentle understanding that things change, and that's okay. As the night deepens, you both rise from the stone by the stream, walking side by side back to the farmhouse. The stars above you twinkle softly like a scattered melody you can almost hear. You know Apollo's music is still there, buried in the land, in the air, in the silence. It's not gone. It's just waiting. And as you walk through the quiet, you realize that it's not the music that matters. It's the spaces in between. The moments when everything is still and you can hear the heartbeat of the world thumping softly in your chest. The farm is quieter now. The cows still graze. The wind still hums. And in that quiet, you know you've learned something important. Something that Apollo might have always known, but never had the time to teach. Sometimes the greatest rhythm is found in the stillness. And sometimes that's all we need. The days grow shorter and the seasons shift with a kind of quiet grace, as though the world itself is taking a deep breath before the cold of winter settles in. The farm, once vibrant with the unpredictable magic of Apollo's presence, now carries the steady pulse of routine. There's a rhythm to the days that wasn't there before, no longer defined by divine harmonies or celestial interruptions, but by the steady beat of life itself. The animals have adapted to the quiet. The cows no longer move in time with invisible melodies. They simply move unhurried, their pace determined by the rhythm of their own bodies, the earth beneath their hooves. The sheep graze without expectation of a song. The chickens peck without an audience to entertain. Even the wind seems to whisper in a more measured tone, as though it too has learned to slow down. Admetus still walks the fields, his steps lighter than they've been in years, but there's a new sense of purpose to his movements. He spends more time in the barn mending tools, checking on the animals, doing the small tasks that were once Apollo's domain. There's a calm to him now, a quiet peace that you can see in the way he moves, in the way he smiles when he passes you by. And though the music is no longer there, you realize it hasn't truly left. It lingers in the spaces between words, in the soft laughter of the workers, in the quiet moments when you catch yourself humming a tune that you don't remember learning. Apollo's presence isn't something that can simply vanish. It has settled into the land, into the people, into the rhythms of life. One evening, as the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange, you find yourself standing on the porch of the farmhouse, looking out at the fields. The world feels still. There's no movement, no sound except the distant rustle of leaves and the occasional call of a bird. And for the first time in a long time, you realize that the silence doesn't feel empty, it feels whole. You look beside you and see Admetus standing there, his hands tucked in his pockets, his eyes gazing out at the land. He doesn't speak, but you sense that he feels it too, the quiet, the peace that has settled over everything. "It's different now," he says softly, as if the words are an echo of his own thoughts. You nod, your gaze still fixed on the horizon. "Yeah, it is, but maybe that's okay." Admetus turns to look at you, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I think I'm starting to understand that. It's not the music we miss. It's the space the music gave us. The room to be. To find our own rhythm without needing someone else to lead the way." You smile, the truth of his words sinking in. "Yeah, it's about finding the beat in the silence." The two of you stand there for a while longer, just listening to the quiet. The world continues steady and unbroken. The animals are settling in for the night, the stars are beginning to twinkle overhead, and the breeze carries with it a faint echo of something familiar, something you can't quite place. It's not Apollo's music. It's not a grand symphony or a celestial chorus, but it's something that's been left behind, woven into the fabric of the land, into the rhythm of life itself. As the evening deepens and the last light fades from the sky, you realize that this is the final note. The one that lingers long after the last chord has been played. The quiet note, the one that carries the weight of everything that has come before it. And for the first time, you understand. The music wasn't Apollo's gift. It was his presence, his ability to make the world feel like it was alive, like it was part of something bigger, something divine. And now in the silence, you know that presence remains. In the land, in the animals, in the air, in you. You turn to Admetus, who is watching the stars, a small, peaceful smile on his face. "I think we've learned something," you say. He nods, his eyes still fixed on the sky. "Yeah, that the quiet is just as important as the noise." And with that, the final piece falls into place. Apollo is gone, but the world continues. The rhythms of life move forward, not defined by the grand, godly music, but by the quiet moments that make everything else meaningful. The stillness, the space, the quiet understanding that even in absence there is presence. The night falls completely now, and the farm is peaceful. The stars are shining brightly above, and the air is cool, filled with the scent of earth and grass. Everything feels just right, as if the universe has found its own balance again. And in the stillness, you realize that this is enough. For now, the music is silent, but the land still sings.